Hi, and welcome to Lesson 2, Converting Percents to Decimals and to Fractions. Okay, we are going to convert percents to decimals. So let's look at a percentage. We have 56% here. Basically, when we work with percents, we do not keep the percent sign in our equations when we're trying to find percent of a number or anything else. So we're going to change this to a decimal. We do that by moving the decimal 2 spaces to the left, and we end up with 56 hundredths. Remember, a percentage is a number out of 100. It's kind of the same concept. So here I just have 4%. So what do you think is going to happen here? Remember I said you move the decimal 2 spaces to the left? Well, there's 1 space, 2 spaces. I have that blank space there. So we're going to put a 0 in front. So we have 4 hundredths. A percentage is a number out of 100. Here I've got 125%. No matter how many digits I have in my percentage, I'm always just going to move the decimal 2 spaces to the left to get my decimal. So here, since I'm 125%, I'm more than 100%. That's why I end up with the whole number 1 in front of my decimal, and then I've got the 25 behind the decimal. Now if you notice here I have 87.5%. Well, you might say, well, that already has a decimal in it. I shouldn't have to do anything. But that's wrong. We still have the percentage sign here. So we have to change it to a decimal before we can do any multiplying or dividing with this number. So once again, I'm going to move that decimal once, twice to the left, and I end up with 875 thousandths. Okay, now we're going to convert percents to fractions. Remember on the previous slide we changed percentages to decimals. Think of it this way. A percentage is a number out of 100. So I've got that decimal of 56 hundredths. All I did really was move the decimal 2 spaces to the left. So I've got 56 hundredths, and once again I would simplify my fraction by the common factor. In this case the greatest common factor is 4, and I get 14/25. If I have 4%, I move that decimal 2 spaces to the left, I get 4 hundredths. And here it is. I divide it by 4. It happens to have the same common factor as the one before, and my answer would be 1/25. Here I have 125%. Remember, anytime I have something over 100%, I have that whole number 1 in front of the decimal. Because let's look at it. I only move the decimal 2 spaces to the left from the back of the percent. So I have 1/25 hundredths. My greatest common factor here is 25. I divide both the numerator and the denominator by 25. I keep my whole number 1, and I get 1/4. Here I have 87.5%. When I move that decimal 2 spaces to the left, I get 875 thousandths. So in this case, I would divide by the common factor, which would be 125, and then I get 7/8. All right, we are moving right along. Now we're going to go back the other way. We're going to convert our decimals to percents. So let's look at my decimal. I have 56 hundredths. Remember on the very first slide when I had that percentage, I moved the decimal 2 spaces to the left. Well, I'm going to just go back the other way. I'm going to move that decimal 2 spaces to the right, and then I get my 56%. It works exactly the same way here. I've got 4 hundredths. I'm going to move that decimal 2 spaces to the right, and I'm left with 4%. I have 1 and 25 hundredths, 2 spaces to the right, and I get 125%. Even here, I've got 875 thousandths, but when I move that decimal 2 spaces to the right, I end up with 87.5%. Moving right along, we're going to convert fractions to percentages, and we are going to start off with the fraction 14/25. The main thing I have to remember throughout this is that a percentage is a number out of 100. So when I have a fraction, the first thing I want to do is look at that denominator and see if it goes into 100 evenly. If it does, I can just make an equivalent fraction and boom, I'm done. I've got my percentage. So here I've got 25. And 25 can go into 100 how many times? Well, it goes in 4 times. So I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by 4, and then I've got 56 over 100. So I have 56%. So here I have 1/25. Once again, 25 goes into 100. So my common factor is going to be 4, and I'm going to multiply both the numerator and denominator by 4. So I've got my 4 over 100, and since, once again, a percent is a number out of 100, I've got 4%. Here I have 1 1/4. Now notice I have that whole number with the fraction. That should automatically tell you I'm going to have something over 100%. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep the 1 as it is, but I'm going to take that 1/4 and multiply it by 25 because 4 goes into 100 25 times. And so I get 1 and 25 over 100, so I get 125%. My next fraction is 7/8. As far as I can think of, 8 doesn't go into 100 evenly, so I have to approach this one a little bit different. And this is probably what you're going to have to do with a lot of your fractions. You're not going to be able to just go straight into 100. So basically, I'm going to have to divide 7 by 8. So here we go. I'm going to divide 7 by 8. My 7 goes in the house because it's my number that I'm dividing. I divide by 8. The first thing I'm going to do is put that decimal straight up into my answer. Next, I am going to see how many times that 8 will go into 70 because I've got to add that 0 so I can keep on dividing behind the decimal. Happens to go in 8 times. I divide 8 times 8 is 64, so I subtract, and I get 6 when I do the subtraction. Well, I have to keep on dividing until I either get a 0 remainder or I get some repeating numbers. So I've got to bring a 0 down to my next spot and just finish on the division until I get my 0 remainder. Here I go. And my percent is going to be 87.5%. Here's another fraction that's going to work a little bit differently. My 3 doesn't go into 100 evenly, so I'm going to have to go ahead and divide 2 by 3. So here we go. I have my decimal right here, and I always bring it straight up. I add my 0. 3 goes into 26 times, so I subtract 18. I get 2. I bring down another 0. 3 goes into 26 times. I get 18. Do you see a pattern here? I keep on going. So this is a repeating decimal. Notice that I keep on getting the same answer after I do my subtraction. So this one's going to work just a little bit differently. Since I know that it's going to repeat over and over again, I'm going to go ahead and move my decimal over, and I'm going to add a fractional piece to it. So I've got 66% with my 2/3 So it's 66 2/3%.